All right, well, thank you everybody for joining me. Last session of your New Hampshire Assistive Technology Fair. I'm so excited to present today on behalf of Future Insight in New Hampshire. And today we're going to be talking about how to scale up students' digital literacy skills. My name is Ting, Ting Su. I'm a teacher of the visually impaired, or TVI, also a certified orientation mobility specialist. And I coordinate the program of visual impairments at San Francisco State. This topic of how to scale up students' digital literacy skills is something that I feel very dearly about because I think as teachers of the visually impaired, as special education teachers, gen ed teachers, parents, pretty much everybody's always asking, well, how do we fit technology into our teaching? We don't even have time in our day. How do we possibly fit that in? And then on the flip side, how must students fit technology into their learning? Because especially for students with sensory disabilities, such as visual impairments, which is my background, our students seem to have so much that they already need to know. So it can seem very overwhelming to figure out how do we fit technology into all of that. So what I'd like to talk about today is rather than thinking about technology as a separate little ball and how do we fit it into this cube, um, let's talk about how we can successfully scale up technology so that we end up with a seamless integration of technology and learning. So on the slide, I just have a picture of a Rubik's Cube with the color scrambled up. And I like to think of it as, we have different tools, and when our students can figure out what tools go into their toolkit, you can scramble it up in any which way and end up with a beautiful Rubik's Cube where everything just fits into place and helps the student get to do what they need. So for students with sensory access needs, as I mentioned, my background is blindness and visual impairments, but any students where they really depend on technology for accessing information, technology does a lot of things for these students. Technology empowers equitable access to information. It dictates how students interact with information. And ultimately, technology shapes how students understand information. And this last point is really why it's so important that students are introduced to technology early on, because if technology is going to mediate how students access and engage with information, it ultimately shapes I like to refer to it as a theory of mind, of how our brains conceptualize information, digest it, and really visualize information in our brains. So technology is a very important tool for our students who otherwise might need to depend on somebody else's assistance to access information, or might always be in that position of just accessing information but not necessarily engaging. So technology can really open doors to leadership for students with disabilities. Ultimately, when technology is implemented well and our students have those great skills to use them as needed, um, technology can help our students achieve accessibility, access to their world. And I know everybody has different ways of thinking about what technology or accessibility means to them. I like to think of this quote from Ed Summers, a good friend of mine who's the director of accessibility at SAS Institute. He says that accessibility is the absence of barriers. And ultimately, as special education personnel, teachers, administrators, our jobs are to teach ourselves out of the job. That's the common saying, right? And so technology can help do that for our students and for us. So I'd like to propose what I call the technology learning curve. I love this graphic. I happened to find it online and I reached out to the author. So I must give credit to Sasha D. Casper. He made this graph, and when I saw it, I just thought, this is it. This is what it means to struggle through and learn technology. And I think this curve is very relevant to, to us as adults who need to learn technology, but it's also very relevant to anybody learning technology, and this includes our students. So on this graph, we've got y-axis labeled experience and x-axis labeled time. And so it starts at 0, 0, and when you are just at the beginning of learning technology, you've got immediately like a pretty good uptick. And this uptick is like, ooh, this looks like fun. And then this uptick levels out and dips down a little bit, and it's like, ooh, this is hard. But then it upticks up. There's a pretty steep slope up again, and it's like, okay, I got no idea what I'm doing, but I'm gonna keep doing it. And at the peak of this slope, it's like, yes, now I get it. But then you've got a slight slope down, and it's like, ooh, maybe I don't got it. And then you kind of you take that dip, you have a low point, and you're like, I don't know stuff. And then you have the ultimate uphill curve where it's like, okay, wait, hold on a minute. This actually makes sense. And then it's like, whoa, did I do that? And then at the top of the technology curve, you're like, yes, I did it. I was able to do this with technology. And I think for any of us who have had to figure out how to really ramp up our technology skills, this is that high end of achievement at the end of a training or webinar or a couple years of struggling. You're like, yes, I got it. So, I mentioned the word years, and I really believe strongly that when we're thinking about how to scale up a student's digital literacy skill, it is a 3-year plan. And I'll talk in a couple minutes about why it's a 3-year plan and how. But when you think about the 3-year plan in learning technology and getting those skills up to that, high point of I did it, we got to take a step back and consider, well, how and when do we start teaching students technology? Well, for those, high stakes situations, high stakes learning environments, kids who are going to be doing those standardized testing. In California, where I am, high stakes standardized testing starts in 3rd grade. 3rd grade is when students are expected to go on their computers and take computer-based tests for high stakes standardized testing. So this means if you have a student in 3rd grade taking these high stakes standardized tests, you need to backtrack 3 years to 2nd grade, 1st grade, and now kindergarten. This means really kindergarten is the absolute latest that the students need to be introduced to technology. Well, okay, that seems pretty early for some people. Some people might be thinking, kindergarten, no way. Kids should still be using, tangible physical materials. Kindergarten's too early for kids. I mean, that's horrible. You hear about families in Silicon Valley who are, anti-devices and limiting screen times. And yes, there is still a need for students to have access to tactile materials, to hard copy braille, to large print, to physical learning media. But remember that technology serves a higher purpose for our students with disabilities, right? Like for other non-disabled students, they have that kind of freedom and liberty to access information in any which way. But when you have a sensory disability, remember the importance of technology in mediating one's access to information. Okay, so in this 3-year plan, how do we start teaching students technology? So I'm going to introduce 4 steps, and these 4 steps are covered in my new textbook from American Printing House for the Blind. It's called Access Technology for Blind and Low Vision Accessibility, and this is also covered in chapter 10 in the book, just in case you want a place to review all this. So step 1, introduce technology as soon as possible, but only incidentally and only for fun. So what this first steps means is that we need to model how access technology is used within tasks. So think about little kindergartners in the room and their teacher goes to print out something. They see that teacher going to the computer, clicking a couple items, it comes up on the teacher's computer, teacher pushes print, and the paper spits out of the printer. That's a lot of incidental learning, just seeing that happen. Or think about even before that, toddlers, preschoolers, they watch how their parents dial a number on the phone. And they're not dialing a number, but they're dialing a person. And they see how that adult is like tapping through a screen to find somebody to call. So for students who might be using access technology, blind and low vision students, they need to have that sort of same incidental learning, hearing how a screen reader works on a computer if you're going to print something out, hearing how a screen reader might sound on a phone as you're clicking through different menu options to dial a person. So in order for us to ensure that we're able to model how access technology is used, we have some additional responsibilities. We do need to know how to use basic built-in accessibility features that are freely available on mainstream tech. And I'm not saying, it's difficult to be an advanced user without really needing to use those advanced features and challenging yourself to use it every day. But we need to at least know enough of the basics so that we can enrich our students' incidental access to information. Because if students are missing out on this world of information in digital formats, they don't even know what they're missing. They don't even know what they're entitled to. So for that reason, it can be very helpful to connect students to their community mentors as soon as possible. This means connecting students to either older peers or adults who have become savvy technology users so that they can get that incidental access and incidental experiences that maybe is more limited with a sighted parent in the home, okay? Ultimately, we just need to embed a sufficient number of incidental learning experiences into the student's natural environment. And you might be wondering, okay, well, what is sufficient? What does that mean? Well, ask what number of incidental learning activities or experiences do typically sighted kids get in their environment? And all I say is that we have to do our best to replicate that as much as possible so that there's equity in students' learning and development of their skills as much as possible with their same age peers. Okay, moving on to step 2. Developing sensory learning channels while playing with tech. So our job is then, we've got the introducing tech. Now we've got to help the students develop their sensory learning channels while playing with tech. And play is the big word here. We need to help our students develop their sensory efficiency skills. So not only is it like, okay, if I've got low vision, how do I maximize my visual access? But how do I start developing my ears for listening to information? How do I start developing my fingers for accessing information in that format? Remember that for students with sensory access needs, students are multimodal learners. Nobody ever only uses low vision devices or only uses auditory or only uses tactile access, but we've got to prepare our students for on-demand use of their different senses. So for some tasks, vision or low vision might be the most efficient use, but then our students have got to be able to pivot and turn on their ears and use auditory and or tactile access when that becomes more efficient than visual. Once our students start developing their sensory learning channels through playing with technology, we can do some observation to start understanding, well, what is the student naturally good at doing? What are they picking up on very naturally? But what are they not? And in that way, you can start drilling down on, okay, where do I really need to focus my instruction here? Or which sensory efficiency skills do I really need to focus on? So that's number one, is we can help figure out how to determine what needs instruction in those related skills and what those related skills are. Secondly, we don't always think about this, but we need to help students relate their conceptual understanding of virtual spaces to physical spaces. So if you're teaching about, swiping a screen or navigating a screen, it's super helpful to have some sort of physical layout that the students can connect to and then relate to, okay, this is how it's being represented on the screen or in the virtual environment. This is what I'm hearing. You can do the same thing if you're thinking about folder organization, like folder and files, moving from physical representation to virtual, or even the layout of a Word document, or even more difficult, like a presentation slide, okay? And then in this step, you can use a step to evaluate a student's needs for additional interventions. So do I need to look at the fine motor skills to get finger isolation or, swiping in different directions? Do I need to do some targeted activities to develop listening skills? Or orientation skills. What does the top of the screen mean or the bottom of the screen mean? What does it mean to swipe right or move forward on a web page? So things like that, this is where you can start getting a little bit more sophisticated in the skills that you need to teach in step 3. And then finally, in step 4, you've already scaled up a student's skills with technology, and now it's time to introduce work-like tasks with fun-focused content. So an example might be, okay, you've played around with text-to-speech, let's say. Students have, developed their listening skills. They've learned what keys to use or what to click on to start and stop text-to-speech. But now, what if I want to look something up? What if I want to look up my favorite animal? Okay, how does this all come together? So now the student can shift from just learning the technology to using technology for learning. Now students can learn how to use their technology within a workflow and to see how different tools connect together to accomplish a task. And this is that critical step where students develop and start exercising fluency in using technology to accomplish a task. Okay, so we've gone through 4 steps generally of how to scale up technology skills, but what do these steps look like in that broader timeline of instruction? Okay, so remember I had proposed a 3-year plan, and this is when you're lucky enough to get that kid early on, when you can start introducing tech in those early years in kindergarten and 1st grade. We're not always that lucky to get kids that early. Sometimes you end up having a late elementary school, a middle schooler, or unfortunately, sometimes you get a high schooler who still has not really scaled up their digital literacy skills. When you find that you're working with an older student, you might be able to speed up how quickly you're able to navigate those 4 steps to scaling up digital technology skills. You might not need 3 years to scale up. You might not have 3 years to scale up, but you're going to want to move as quickly as possible to scale up those skills, because ultimately by senior year in high school, our students should not need us as more than just like a resources kind of manager. They really need to be ready for life after high school or life after special education ends at age 22. And we should already be stepping out of the picture to help these students transition to the next step. I really want to encourage you guys to think about how to introduce technology as soon as possible, but also introduce it in such a way that it's super fun. You get the students buy-in from the very beginning, and the students, as they're learning the technology, they're also learning the pros and cons of each tool, because ultimately the students are the ones who need to be empowered to decide when and which tools do I use for which tasks. So, as we're introducing the technology, as we're developing the student sensory efficiency skills, we're also teaching the students how to make those decisions for themselves. And when you're able to do that, that issue of, oh, well, the student won't use their technology, it becomes less of an issue because they've got buy-in from the very beginning, okay? There are a couple resources I wanted to share with you guys for introducing technology to blind and low vision students. And even if there are people in this room who are not necessarily working with blind and low vision students, the concepts can be translated to whatever technology is relevant to a different demographic of student needs. Those concepts of how do I introduce is probably similar, is my guess. There's a couple posts on Perkins Paths to Technology website. The first one is Introducing Technology to Students with Visual Impairments for toddler, preschool, and kindergarten students. So, I'm not the only one saying to start early and start young, but I really like this blog post because it just gives ideas for how to introduce technology. Another Perkins Paths to Technology post I really like is called 5 Reasons Why Your Students Should Learn to Read at a Rate of 600 Words per Minute. I think this is a really, really great read for older students, actually, in particular, to, so it's not just like, oh, Miss Ting, stop telling me I need to listen to things, or, oh, Miss Ting, I don't want to use this other technology, or this is just how I do it. But, give your students the information so that they can make their own informed decisions about which tools they need. This blog post is written by Ed Summers, and it's a 4-part series. Great read, just looking at, again, that idea of sensory efficiency, and empowering students to make those choices for how they want to be multimodal students. The third item here is called ABC of iOS Manual. This is a voiceover manual for toddlers and beyond. It's an e-manual developed by Diane Bronner for CNIB, and this is just a great step-by-step for how to learn voiceover, and again, how to scale up those digital literacy skills. And the last resource, I like sharing this with parents who, want to learn how to turn on those built-in accessibility features to provide those incidental learning opportunities. It's called Zoom In. It is a free iBook. It's written by Luis Perez. Luis is also part of the CAST organization. So he does lots of work on universal design for learning. And I love how his iBook manual just breaks down all the different iOS accessibility features. There's like a 2-minute video to show each feature, talks about pros and cons of each one. So it's a great, very, very user-friendly manual for anybody to start learning how to use some of these accessibility features. And then that brings us to the end. This is a very quick presentation. I did want to leave a couple minutes just in case there are any burning questions. But before we do that, I just wanted to say thank you to Future Insight in New Hampshire again for sponsoring this presentation. And again, my name is Ting Su. You can find me on Facebook under my full name, Yue-Ting Su. And I am probably best available on Twitter, to be honest. And I'm on Twitter at TVI_Ting. And I just thought I'd just give a little nod to my day job. I actually coordinate the teacher training program in visual impairments at San Francisco State. So our classes have actually been on Zoom for many, many years. So we've got it nailed with the online teaching and learning. So that's been pretty cool, actually. So you can find us at viprogram.sfsu.edu and on all the social medias at viprogramsfsu. So with that, I will...
Tell us the name of your book.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. I should have probably included that.
Probably.
It's called Access Technology for Blind and Low Vision Accessibility. And it's available from APH, the American Printing House for the Blind. Thanks again for coming, everybody. Nice to see you, Claudia. Take care out there.